Well, this is one of those weeks where there isn't a lot of news, but what we do have is quite big and or very interesting. There were a ton of high-profile reveals and releases this week, and a few info dumps from Microsoft and Halo being shaken up, to Paradox Interactive admitting its many failures, and Ubisoft still being in very dire straits, and a chilling report about Roblox's CP nightmare. But let's kick things off with the destruction of 343 Industries. Okay, destruction is a bit dramatic, but 343 is no more, and in its place, Halo Studios has been born. In reality, it's more of a rebranding, so it's not like the entirety of 343 got the boot, but heavy restructuring was done to realign the studio's new incarnation to focus solely on the Halo franchise. One of the more impactful changes, at least for developers and gamers, is the switch from their in-house Slipspace engine to Unreal 5, which is a big deal because, as we all know, the Slipspace engine wasn't doing the franchise any favors. 343 Industries previously had to dedicate a large portion of its staff to ongoing development and upkeep of Slipspace, but the team is now working with Epic Games to ensure Unreal Engine 5 meets Halo's needs. The way we made Halo games before doesn't necessarily work as well for the way we want to make games for the future, said Halo Studios COO Elizabeth Van Wyck. So part of the conversation we had was about how we help the team focus on making games versus making the tools and the engines. It's hard to say whether or not this kind of rebranding and restructuring will return the franchise to its golden age, but it was definitely time for a change. 343's handling of the Halo universe has been more hit than miss, and although it kind of feels like a superficial change, I think there's enough meat here to at least be somewhat hopeful for the future of the games. We'll just have to wait and see. And to that end, we've got a handful of Halo announcements to quickly go over. An early E3 demo from 2003 that got gamers hot and bothered back in the day is set to be released for the Master Chief Collection, finally allowing gamers to experience the content that never made it into the original's full release. So that's pretty cool, if not earth-shaking. Halo Infinite is also getting a third-person mode for some reason. I'm all for the new features, but this one's a bit strange. Still, more the merrier, I suppose. On a more exciting note, Halo Infinite is also getting a Helljumpers custom forge mode that takes its inspiration straight out of Helldivers 2. But before the copycat cries get raised, ODSTs, or Helljumpers, have been part of the Halo lore since the beginning, and yes, they drop down onto planets in little pods as well. For context, a former Halo developer revealed that series developer 343 Industries apparently shot down several spin-off pitches, including one ODST game that very much resembled this year's biggest shooter, Helldivers 2. Rather than simply yearning for what could have been, a team of superforgers got to work on an unofficial version themselves. Now that I think about it, that third-person mode update makes a little bit more sense. As for any big new Halo games on the horizon, the studio is saying that nothing is imminent, so I'd expect a healthy wait before we get that Unreal 5 version of Halo that we're all hoping for. Moving on to some debriefs, we've got Ubisoft again. But here's the thing, I've seen a lot of confusion online about what is going on with the company, the Guillemot brothers, Tencent, AJ Investment, and even Vivendi's name getting rattled about again. So here's a quick debrief to clear up the confusion, or at least clear it up to the best of my ability and knowledge. In a nutshell, Ubisoft was formed in the 80s by the Guillemot family and has been owned and operated by the family ever since. However, in the early to mid 2010s, another French company, Vivendi, pulled some corporate BSery and attempted a hostile takeover of Ubisoft. It was big news for a while, and that story in and of itself is an interesting deep dive if you've the mind to look into it, but the takeover ultimately failed. Jump forward to this year, and a few weeks back, a company called AJ Invest, a private investment firm, gobbled up a small amount of cheap Ubisoft stock, then turned around and released a letter that accused the Guillemot family of, to put it simply, being bad owners. You see, AJ Invest, using somewhat complicated tactics and legal action, wants Ubisoft to refocus itself based on their own vision for the company. All in the name of protecting shareholders, of course. As a consequence of AJ Invest's vision, the Guillemot family would likely be ousted from their company, and surprise, surprise, they aren't too happy about that. So Ubisoft is faced with a choice. Do they give in to AJ Invest and most likely lose control of their own company? Or do they try to marshal support from their investors to fight against AJ Invest and their backers? And yes, it is a bit more complicated than all that, but that is the very brief story setup. Jump forward to this week, and suddenly headlines are appearing about the Guillemot family and Tencent possibly taking the company private. This essentially provides an out for the Guillemot family, as they can take the company private thanks to Tencent's support, give their current investors a big payout thanks to Tencent support, and finally, this will get AJ Invest as well as any other troubling investor firms completely out of their hair. Again, all thanks to Tencent support. See the problem here? The Guillemots are relying and trusting Tencent to not pull the rug out from underneath them and say, oh, by the way, thanks for the company, it's ours now. Is that likely to happen? Probably not, but only Tencent can really say. It should be remembered that this is simply a third option for Ubisoft to explore and not one they've already pulled the trigger on. So as of this writing, Ubisoft are still in a lot of trouble, and a year from now, there's really no telling what the company may look like. But considering the numbers floating around that indicate Star Wars Outlaws only sold a little over 1 million copies after a month, which is atrocious if correct, and Assassin's Creed Shadows looking more and more like it is a lost cause, on top of a data privacy lawsuit on the horizon, clearly, even if Tencent and Ubisoft play nice together, the company has a lot of issues and not all of them are investor related. There will absolutely be more updates on this as it unfolds, and I'll let you know when I learn more. And speaking of companies in hot water, anyone remember when Paradox Interactive released Lamplighters League? Probably not, it flopped really hard. Or how about when Cities Skylines 2 DLC was delayed because even after a year, the game is still basically a glorified beta? Or maybe you remember when Paradox ended its relationship with Double 11, the developers of Prison Architect 2, before putting the project on indefinite hold. Or maybe you remember how Paradox Tectonic was abruptly shut down and Life by You cancelled. Any of this ringing a bell? Because this is roughly all Paradox has to show for itself over the past 12 to 18 months, not counting development time. Taken all together, it's a pretty damning series of events. When a single project falls through, it can be easy to blame the individual developing studio or maybe the leadership of that studio, but when project after project continues to flop or just die before being released, then there's a bigger problem: Paradox's entire leadership team. It's no surprise then that Paradox Deputy CEO Matthias Lilja and Chief Creative Officer Henrik, I'm gonna butcher this, Farias, spoke with PC Gamer this week about how they are planning to win fans back. The TLDR of the interview is that Paradox will be scaling back operations and returning to what they're good at, strategy games. According to Matthias and Henrik, games like Lamplighters League and Life by You were far outside of their comfort zone and eventually descended into development hell because of their own inexperience. And that's fair enough, not every studio can make every game. The leadership pair also want to return to a more open and genuine lines of communication with their players, and that too is commendable. The interview over at PC Gamer is a step in the right direction, at least in terms of communication and intent, and I'm sure Paradox strategy game fans will be pleased to hear the company refocusing on their bread and butter. As for projects like Vampire The Masquerade Bloodlines 2, which Lilja says is on the edge of their competence, well, it's a little bit more complicated. Originally, the game was set to be released in 2020, but after dropping developer Hardsuit Labs and giving the title over to the Chinese room, the game was put into development limbo. We now know that although Paradox is shifting gears and refocusing on strategy games, they do intend to release Bloodlines 2 sometime in early 2025. After that, though, the franchise looks to be licensed out to other developers more suited to the genre. However, in an interview over at Rock Paper Shotgun, Lilja expanded the information about Bloodlines 2, which is sure to anger a lot of fans, unfortunately. I like the first game as well a lot, but we want to clarify what this game is so people have a clear understanding of what they're buying, so they don't come in with weird expectations. Because we don't want that. We want them to understand that this is an action RPG with a storyline that is more fixed. It's not the open sim it maybe shouldn't be compared to. Again, we want people to understand what they're getting into. And this just blows my mind. What do you mean come in with weird expectations? The previous game was an open world sim. What are you talking about? That's what we would expect the sequel to be. I'm just kind of blown away by that. But there you have it. Once again, a CEO thinks he knows what gamers want more than gamers do. Say farewell to a Bloodlines 2 that properly expanded an open world, letting you play as a vampire making complex decisions in a living world, the very things that made the original so enduring. Instead, we're getting another linear action RPG that's more akin to a spiritual successor than a sequel. If you're like me, then your excitement for the game just died. Whoa there, past Leebs. So I'm not sure if I missed this in my initial research or if the information is just now coming to light, but it looks like some of the more in-house previews that are going around for the new Vampire game, they're being compared to something more akin to Dishonored, which if that's the case, hey, I'm all on board for that, and I know a lot of you guys will be too. So, my angry, dramatic rant aside, if this is what we're actually going to get from the Chinese room on the Bloodlines 2 front, okay, I'm still going to be hesitant and wait and see how it comes along, but my interest isn't completely destroyed. Okay, let's get back to past Leebs. But my disdain for their handling of Bloodlines 2 aside, on the surface, Paradox's strategy seems sound, and according to their own timeline, they're hoping that fans will see the fruits of this shift sometime in 2025, and definitely by 2026. But here's the rub. Paradox is no stranger to this kind of erratic behavior, so why should gamers believe them this time? Why are the deputy CEO and chief creative officer holding these interviews? Where's Frederick Wester? You know, the actual CEO. I don't know, gamers, do you really trust Paradox to make a U-turn and release quality games? I'll have to see it before I believe it. Moving on, I don't usually cover Roblox on this channel for obvious reasons, but this week the company has come under fire for being, and I quote, an X-rated pedo hellscape where groups are openly soliciting favors and trading CP. Sorry for the censorship, but YouTube is what it is, and I am far too smart of a channel to challenge their idiocy. The report comes courtesy of Hindenburg Research, and it's an incredibly comprehensive and lengthy document backed up by a huge amount of research, as well as conversations with former Roblox data scientists and developers. The report also details numerous Roblox games titled Escape from Epstein Island and Run from Diddy Simulator, and variations thereof, images of male genitalia being shared in a school simulator game with no age restrictions, and other games designed around offing pregnant women, going on a spree in a hospital, or simulated... Okay, I can't even read the rest of this. Hindenburg Research claims Roblox insiders have cashed out $1.7 billion in stock while reporting losses each quarter. Publicly, Roblox boasts of huge engagement statistics, but the report says user numbers have been inflated by 25 to 42%, while user engagement hours have been inflated by an estimated 100+%. So yeah, that's all horrible. Roblox has responded, but their response was basically, nuh-uh. Please pay attention to what your children are playing. Okay, I feel like I should have put that later down in the video, because moving on from that is kind of difficult, but let's move on to some actual games. As I mentioned at the start of the video, this news week has a ton of high-profile reveals and releases. Kicking things off with a fan favorite announcement this week, the original Red Dead Redemption has finally been announced for PC. After being leaked multiple times, the cat's finally and firmly out of the bag. Fortunately, this newer PC version also comes with some new bells and whistles, including support for native 4K at 144 frames per second, ultra-wide and super ultra-wide support, HDR10, keyboard and mouse support, DLSS 3.7 with FrameGen, and FSR 3.0 upscaling, as well as expanded graphics settings. As a nice added bonus, the Undead Nightmare expansion is also included in the deal. You'll be able to pick it up on PC this October 28th, so that's exciting. But my personal favorite new game announcement this week goes to Creative Assembly, because we are finally getting an Alien Isolation sequel. The announcement came on the back of the game's 10-year anniversary. It is nuts we have had to wait 10 years for word on a sequel, but at least it's here now. Better yet, Alistair Hope, the game's original director, is going to be returning for the sequel, so all signs are looking promising so far. No concrete information outside of the project's existence was given, but for now that's probably enough for most of us. I'm just happy it's finally being made. Another oddly underrepresented franchise in the gaming sphere is Avatar The Last Airbender. It's one of those hugely popular franchises that just hasn't gotten a huge breakout video game hit. But now Saber Interactive and Paramount Game Studios are hoping to change that. As revealed by IGN, Avatar The Last Airbender is getting its first AAA game, and it will take place in the Avatar Legends setting. Not a lot is known just yet, but players will be put into the role of a never-before-seen avatar in a story that takes place 1,000 years in the past. As with the Alien Isolation sequel, I wouldn't be expecting this one anytime soon. This is another exciting one. Former devs from Bethesda, BioWare, and Naughty Dog have founded their own indie studio, Near Studios, and just announced their first project. Hawthorne, which boasts some impressive talent including Mass Effect and The Last of Us veterans, as well as Skyrim's lead designer, Bruce Nesmith. The studio is calling Hawthorne an immersive Skyrim sandbox meets Stardew Valley village simulation, and that sounds really up my alley, though I'll admit I'm not 100% sure what it even means. In any case, don't expect this one anytime soon either, but it does have a promising pedigree and a concept. The next installment of the Pathologic series from Hype Train Digital and Icepick Lodge was announced this week, and it looks to be a familiar outing for fans of the series. From the Steam page, Bachelor Daniel Dukovsky is a young doctor from the capital. Capitable? Why do I keep saying capitable? Bachelor Daniel Dukovsky is a young doctor from the capital. His search for the secret of immortality brings him to a remote town gripped by a mysterious plague that will destroy it in 12 days. Now it's up to him to explore the town itself, its past, present, and future, to find answers to his numerous questions and try to stop the relentless epidemic. I've never played these games, but from what I understand, although this is the third game in the series, The second game was something of a remake/reboot of one of the first game's character paths, and now the third game is also a kind of remake/reboot of The Bachelor's character path from the first game. Fans of the series, you're gonna have to untangle the mess in the comments for me. There's also something of a time travel mechanic in the game that will allow you to change events and unlock new outcomes. And since there is a 12-day time limit on your character's quest, I'm wondering if there'll be something like a Majora's Mask mechanic where after those 12 days, the world resets and you continue solving the mystery with new information. Basically, I just want more games with that mechanic, please. Pathologic 3 will be out sometime next year for the PC, PS5, and the Xbox Series X and S. Those were some of the announced games this week, but what about the actual releases? Well, Konami's highly anticipated Silent Hill 2 remake finally emerged from the fog this week, and early reviews are quite positive. At the time of this writing, the game has a mighty rating over on OpenCritic with 93% of critics recommending. Gaming Bolt's Rashid Sayed gave the game a perfect 10 out of 10, saying, Bloober Team and Konami's remake of the 2001 classic is easily one of the best survival horror games out there. The new Silent Hill 2 easily stands amongst the likes of Resident Evil 2 and Dead Space, making it a must-play game for veterans and newcomers alike. While the gamer's James Kennedy was a bit more conservative with a 3.5 stars out of 5, saying, Bloober Team's vision of Silent Hill 2 often feels like a high-fidelity version of the original with remixed puzzles and item locations. The combat is reasonably satisfying, the boss encounters have been improved, but what is fundamentally a great horror game is partially undermined by the over-the-top sound design, injection of jump scares, and general lack of restraint. Overall, the sentiment is looking quite positive, and while the remake is out on the PC and the PS5, Xbox gamers will have to wait a year until the PS5 exclusivity stink wears off. But the launch wasn't without its own bit of drama, as the Wikipedia page for the remake had to be put into a semi-lockdown state after some angry fans took to altering the scores on the page to reflect much lower values. I don't know, can we even call these people fans? I mean, I get it, you don't like the remake, and that's totally fine, you're not obligated to, but defacing a public resource because you're mad isn't the play, champ. Moving along, how'd you like a game with even better review scores? Well, apparently the devs over at Atlas have done it again with Metaphor ReFantazio, which currently has a mighty rating with 98% of critics recommending. And yeah, this one isn't at all surprising. Take a team of Persona vets and tell them to level up the formula, and guess what? You get something even better. GameRant, Eurogamer, The Gamer, GameSpot, VG247, and Video Games Chronicle all gave Metaphor a perfect score, while numerous other outlets rated the release a 9 out of 10 or a 4 out of 5 stars respectively. So if you're in the market for a new anime-style social sim RPG, it looks like Metaphor ReFantazio is a pretty safe bet. It's out now for the PC, PS4, PS5, and the Xbox Series X and S. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero also launched this week to pretty solid reviews with a strong rating and 81% of critics recommending the title. George Foster from The Gamer gave the game a 4.5 stars out of 5, saying, its smart evolution of the Budokai Tenkaichi combat, stacked and detailed roster, and near endless amount of modes and features make it one of the best Dragon Ball games of all time, and one that's going to be nearly impossible to top. While Ian Walker from Games Radar was a bit more lukewarm on the game, saying, intentionally prioritizing flashy fan service over competitive play, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero provides the most complete series toy box yet. But with simple enemy AI and repetitive fighting mechanics, it lacks the depth of its more serious competition to the point of becoming rote. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is out October 10th for the PC, PS5, and the Xbox Series X and S. Moving away from anime and into Diablo 4's Hellscape, the Vessel of Hatred expansion launched on the 8th, and it seems as if Diablo 4 may actually be saved. Between the various patches, not the least of which was the Loot 2.0 earlier this year, and now Vessel of Hatred coming in hot, Diablo 4 fans finally maybe have the game that they expected to get last year. Currently, the expansion has a mighty rating with 92% of critics recommending the experience. For myself, I usually defer to Riker when it comes to Diablo, and in his words, he said, "This is Diablo 4 in its ultimate form. If you like Diablo, if you play Diablo, Vessel of Hatred is a must-buy. While you could play without Vessel of Hatred, you're going to be leaving behind arguably the best designed class." All that said, the game did have some technical hiccups at launch, which naturally led to review bombing on Steam. I'll keep an eye on the issues in case the problems become worse, but at the moment, once the launch issues are fully tidied up, I may actually reinstall the game. Maybe. The last big budget release we're going to cover this week unfortunately doesn't fare quite as well as its contemporaries. Ballistic Moon and Sony's Until Dawn remake only has about 45% of critics recommending it. Granted, that's only about out of 11 reviews at this time, but the Steam mixed reviews don't tell a much different story either. Of course, part of the problem over on Steam is Sony's stubborn insistence on requiring PSN for their games. But more than that, critics and gamers alike are unhappy with the game's optimization, bugs, bizarre music changes, and overall just somehow looking worse than the original despite the fidelity upgrades. This comment on our games from RareBK with almost 3K upvotes sums up a few of the problems. From awkwardly added new music tracks, removed music tracks, strange audio cues, and the over-the-shoulder perspective change, which just sort of ruins the game's original vibe. Ballistic Moon released a statement urging players to report problems. Excuse me, not problems, because that would be admitting that there's something wrong. Rather, they're hoping players will reach out to them so they can address their concerns. Sony, Ballistic Moon, here, I'm right here, let me explain the problem to you. You remade a game that didn't look bad, nor did it have outdated mechanics. You changed the perspective and made it look worse. You made it buggier. You made it sound worse. You charged $60 for it. You didn't market it. You put a PSN requirement for a single-player game on PC. Now you know why no one wants your game. You're welcome, let's move on. Except I can't move on from Sony, because Sony is now delisting the original Horizon Zero Dawn, forcing anyone who wants to play the game to buy the new remastered edition coming out at the end of this month. Considering the hit or miss quality of Sony's PC remakes and remasters, I'm predicting the Horizon Zero Dawn remaster will only sell marginally better than the Until Dawn remake. Sony's PC strategy must have been designed by monkeys, because all they've done this year, despite putting out more and more games on PC, is convince many PC players that they don't need to play Sony games. But turning away from Sony shenanigans and looking at the broader industry upheaval going on, we've got even more layoffs this week, with XR Games, the studio behind Hitman 3 VR Reloaded, among many other titles, announcing a layoff of 72 out of 84 staff. Despite letting go of almost the entire studio, XR Games has issued statements to numerous outlets claiming that their upcoming titles, Zombie Army VR and Starship Troopers Continuum, will be released later this year. Aside from blaming the volatile VR market, not much is known about what led to these layoffs, but with only a skeleton crew remaining once the final VR titles are out in the wild, I expect XR Games will close the doors entirely, but that's just my inner doomer speculating. Tequila Works, the devs behind Rime, are also laying off a small number of roles and canceling an unannounced game. The studio's last game, a League of Legends spin-off, was shut down in January of this year after Riot went through their own round of layoffs. It is a tough time for small studios. Big companies like Riot basically are the architects of their own problems, but oftentimes it's the smaller studios who pay the price for these ultra-wealthy soulless suits. That said, even smaller companies like Humble Games have their own monkey-suited leadership. You may remember a couple months ago when all 36 staff members of the company were laid off, only for leadership to turn around and pretend that the company wasn't shutting down. It was quickly revealed that the PAL Group would be taking over the publishing responsibilities after the layoffs. The story has taken another oddball turn this week as former Humble Games leaders Alan Patmore and Mark Nash have founded Good Games Group to assist with supporting Humble Games' previous releases. So even though Humble Games isn't shutting down, as far as anyone can tell, there's barely anyone left, the PAL Group, along with Good Games Group, have taken over the company's duties. So your guess is as good as mine if anything playable, much less actually good, comes from Humble Games' seeming collapse. Well, I think that's quite enough industry BS for one video. How about a fully 3D printed, writable Star Wars AT-AT? This is super impressive. James Bruton, a YouTuber with experience in toy design, robotics, and electrical and mechanical engineering, went and did what every kid growing up watching Star Wars wanted to do: ride their own AT-AT. I'd slot in some footage here, but YouTube has been even more touchy recently, so there's a link down below if you want to check it out. It's unsurprisingly quite slow, but it is undeniably cool. Or maybe you're more of a Halo fan, in which case here's an actual warthog. Mechanical and electrical engineers are nuts. Or maybe it's just engineers in general. Peter Walczak spent over 10 years and thousands of dollars recreating the iconic Halo vehicle for no other reason than why not, and frankly, that's the best reason. After buying a new house with a garage, Peter bought an old beater from a friend and very slowly turned it into this incredible beast. There you have it, something of an exciting week this week. The Halo shakeup was kind of unexpected but welcome news, and the Ubisoft saga has somehow gotten more interesting rather than less, which makes reading and writing about it much less obnoxious. But that's it for me this week. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Simply hanging around for the whole video is a massive help for the channel, and I greatly appreciate it. As always, I hope you have a great weekend and stay safe out there. Later.